trees and rocks. That's when somebody asks me what I do for a living, I'm like, I like to take pictures of rocks and trees. And they're usually like, that's weird that that's your job. And I say, what do you do? I'm a doctor. Oh, yeah. That's probably a little more practical. All right, I'm here near Capitol Reef, and I'm just kind of exploring for a little bit. It is a super clear day today. I don't see a single cloud, and it's also super windy. We've got gusts of up to like 35 miles an hour, maybe even 40 tonight. Not really excited about that part. Can't really fly the drone. No clouds, so can't really do those wide angle perspectives. But you know what? I'm trying to make the best out of the situation by using my telephoto lens, and I'm finding areas that are in shadow to focus on. So behind me, there's this really cool rock wall, and the sun is right behind that rock wall. So it's a nice bit of diffused light with really interesting textures. There's also a lot of pretty cool foliage around here. So I'm gonna play around with the 100 to 400 lens and see if I can create a few images in conditions that, well, let's be honest, most of us when we go on these photo trips, we don't want these blue sky days, but they're probably gonna happen. I think they happen every single trip that I take. I just love this rock wall back there with all these patterns and textures. A lot of warm colors. Shooting this handheld, optical stabilization is on. I have some bushes down at the bottom of the composition. I'm just trying to crop those out. Although maybe they would make for an interesting composition. I'm not sure. So here's my favorite shot of this rock wall. Love those different textures and patterns going on here, and the little bits of reflected light in all these holes. I made sure to accentuate that in post using some dodging and burning. I spent hours in Utah just capturing different rock walls with all these different colors and shapes, and I'm really happy with the way this one came out. This is an incredible wall just to look at. And you can see how the colors transition and the shapes transition from the top to bottom. It's pretty remarkable how many cool things there are to shoot in the desert, even on a day like this. It's amazing. Here's another beautiful pattern I found on this rock wall. Again, those nice warm pastel colors I felt like worked really well for this scene. And I love those darker lines that are breaking up this diagonal pattern, and they almost look like drips of liquid coming down this wall. Did almost feel like somebody had just splattered a bunch of paint onto this rock wall to create this pattern. Here's a more zoomed out perspective of that same scene, and this time I decided to include a little bit more of those shapes on the top of the photograph. I'd be curious to know your opinion. Do you like this wider scene that shows a little bit more of the rock wall, gives a little bit more context with these holes, or do you like the closer up scene that excludes the top of the photograph? Tried to film back there. It was so windy, the tripod almost knocked over. I think that we're in this perfect little pocket where the wind isn't getting us. I found some pretty interesting stuff over there, but beyond just this rock wall that I've been pretty much rambling about, I found another rock wall on the other side over there with a little bit of fall foliage, some yellow kind of leaves and a few other bushes in front. Not sure if the pictures came out, but to be honest with you, they look pretty good on the back of my camera. We'll see.
Here's a shot of some fall foliage in front of another beautiful rock wall. I love the colors here with those yellows in the foliage, and then some of the blue tones in the foliage actually helped as well to contrast those reddish orange tones in the rock wall. When I approached this scene, I thought it was super beautiful, but a little bit chaotic. I struggled quite a bit to kind of compose this in a way that made sense visually and wasn't just a bunch of shapes and colors all mashed into one. I was playing around with some vertical shots, a few at 400 millimeters where I focused just on the fall foliage and the background. And then I realized at about 150 millimeters, this frame right here, this exact framing, ended up making kind of a nice X shape out of the rocks down below, the rocks on the bottom right and bottom left, kind of made an X shape into a little bit of those yellow tones right almost smack dab in the middle of the photograph. And you can see there's two cracks in the rock wall behind that kind of make the opposite pattern. So I ended up really enjoying this composition and thought it turned out pretty good. So after shooting those really incredible rock walls, I decided to meet up with a friend who was traveling in Utah and go for a hike through a slot canyon. I didn't really have any plans to take pictures in the slot canyon, but I did decide to bring one camera and one wide lens with me just in case. And as I was exploring the slot canyon, I found a really cool tree and I just couldn't help myself. I spent about 45 minutes just playing around with the different textures of this tree, and it was nice because the tree was laying, again, similar to the last scene, right against a pretty large rock wall, so the entire tree was in nice diffused and reflected light. Since I didn't have a tripod with me, I pretty much just bumped up my ISO and switched to f11. I also tried to make sure that everything that I was shooting was on the same plane of focus.
So I made it out to these kind of interesting cathedral walls that are near Goblin Valley State Park, and I was actually scouting this a little bit on the way to the Slot Canyon hike, and I thought it would be an interesting place to explore and see if I can find a composition. Now I've got the telephoto out. I was trying to take pictures on the hike in, but I don't think those images are going to turn out. What I want to do is kind of get into these rocks and see if there's any wide angle perspectives. I have no idea if it's going to work or not, but it seems like a lot of fun, so I'm going to try it. All right, well, admittedly that didn't work as well as I thought it would. It looked a lot cooler from a distance than the rocks looked when you're actually in there. But that happens, you know, go for a little scout, realize the composition isn't gonna work, but you never know unless you go. So, you know, I didn't really mean for that to come off that cheesy.
So even though my idea of getting close up into the rock wall didn't really work, I'm really happy with the way these telephoto shots ended up coming out. I shot this image right here, which I thought was cool. I loved those little horizontal patterns and the nice contrast of the bluish tones and the warmer tones in the rock from that reflected light. I decided to zoom in to about 400 millimeters, and this ended up being my favorite shot of the day. If you watched my previous episodes in Utah, you'll know that I really love finding strange faces in rocks, and this one definitely struck my curiosity quite a bit, and my imagination just went wild as I was shooting this scene. When I processed these images, I was actually listening to one of my favorite artists, Bonobo, and he makes a lot of experimental music, which helped to kind of put me in the right mood and the right artistic mindset to produce some of these strange images.
But, you know, sunlight's getting a little higher even in the sky, and some of these areas that were initially in shadow are now in sunlight. I do love when the conditions are amazing and you get those billowing clouds, or you get the rainbows, or you get the Milky Way, but There's something to be said about shooting when conditions are a little less than ideal. I think for me, I actually find it a little bit more rewarding, and the reason for that is the challenge. It really is so much more challenging to create an interesting composition when the conditions aren't great. When you've got those cotton candy clouds, it's pretty easy to just take a shot, find a composition that looks okay, and then it's almost like the conditions can carry the shot. Even if your composition isn't amazing, maybe the clouds are enough to make it a striking photograph to people. Now, of course, you can get shots with great conditions and great compositions, but I do think it is good practice to get out during days like this and see if you can create anything interesting. You know, the expression is, it's all about the light. You know, good light can come from poor days if you find it, if you look hard enough, if you search and you use a little bit of creativity. If you have good light all around you, it's pretty easy to just take a bunch of awesome pictures. But when the lighting is tough, it can be a test, it can be a challenge. Again, if you're one of those people who just only goes out when it's partial cloud, partial sunlight, and it looks like the conditions are amazing, I would encourage you, get out on a day like this. Get out on a day where it's pouring rain and try and create compositions, or get out on a day where it's bluebird skies and there's not a cloud in sight, and see if you can create something interesting. And if you can, at least for me, I feel pretty accomplished when I do. So I'd encourage you, get out there on days like this and play around.
I really hope this video encourages you to get out there and explore more, even during clear days. Don't let the conditions get you down. Get out there and shoot, because you never know what you'll be able to come up with. That's going to wrap it up for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next one.